uses these words in ways that demand that we recognize the different contexts, then we have to allow that as well. And as long as we follow meaningful rules of exegesis, that's not going to be that difficult to do. But what you have very often in online debates is, I want to win this point, and therefore I'm just going to do whatever I need to do to make my position hold up. And
Right.
so, as I've said many, many times, the key to recognizing the key to recognizing consistency and truth is, are you using the same form of exegesis on the subject that you're debating that you would use in defending issues that might be in common between you and the other person? So, for example, if you're both Christians, you both believe in the deity of Christ, and it's not that's a non-negotiable between you, then the question is, which one of the two of you is using the same exegetical parameters now in your current debate that you would both use in defending the deity of Christ, and who isn't? And that is the way of identifying who's being consistent and where you've run into tradition. Because tradition is where you will end up abandoning those methods of exegesis. And that, to me, people say, well, how can we decide these things? That, to me, is about one of the only ways we've been given, is to recognize that very thing right there. Will I use the same kind of interpretation, the same type of hermeneutics, same type of exegesis over here as I do over there? And you'll see me very often criticizing those with whom I'm debating on that very issue. That to me is really decides it. So the term of, by the way, I went to Romans 11:5 actually when you said that. In the same way, then, there has also come to be at the present time a remnant according to God's gracious choice, but as grace is no longer on the basis of works, otherwise grace is no longer grace. So that term there, the lima, the remnant, really, really important. And
that wouldn't be limited to Israel, or that's just his remnant.
No, I don't believe it's. Well, okay. Remember, yes and no, depending on what you think Israel means. I mean, we are the Israel of God. So there are places where the Israel of God and the elect are the same thing. But then in another instance, if you're talking to the Gentiles about not boasting against the Jews, now you've got to allow Paul to be speaking in another context. So, so you could say it's always the Israel of God. We are the true circumcision who worship God in spirit and in truth. Isn't that what Paul says to the Philippians? So, we have to be careful in our utilization, because especially today, especially given the eschatology that a lot of people hold, Israel is defined in one particular way, and there's no way it can have any multiple meanings. There's no way it can be, if Paul ever uses it of us, then it has to be in some fashion that really doesn't mean anything. So
because that was kind of going to be like a side question, because when I read Romans 9, I see, and I listened to your sermon, by the way, and I think it's one of the best ones I've heard. And when I read it, I see Israel and as defined as a spiritual Israel, as God's chosen people. So when I would go read Romans 11, I would, naturally just see it as that. But
but remember, it's now you're starting to talk about the olive tree. You're talking about the grafting in. You're talking about a hardening. Then the big question becomes, what does it mean that all Israel will be saved? I know there are certain people saying, that's going to be an absolute ethnic salvation, which makes me really uncomfortable. And it gets pretty complicated. And I'll be honest with you, I know good men who have come to different conclusions on some of the more thorny issues of the reference found in Romans 11. And because of that, I think we need to be careful using any of that to beat anybody else over the head with. Probably a good idea. All right?
Yeah, and another thing, I was the mystery Twitter guy that asked you if I could ask a question, so this was my question. I borrowed a phone.
Oh, you borrowed? Yeah, you were saying my phone's broken. It's like,
yeah, it
well,
broke in church.
go to Verizon, get it fixed.
I think that's God telling me not to use it in church.
Oh, good. All right, James, appreciate it.
All right, thank you very much. You have a great day.
All right, thanks. God bless. Bye-bye.
Bye.
So, what do you think, guys? We've got 3 calls. Do we just limit it to these 3 and just go as long as it takes to get these 3? Okay, so Scott, Ron, Marco, hold on. We're going to get to you, though. Man, I'm looking at one going, oh, good grief. Sometimes people come with questions. And now the phone's ringing again. So come with questions that it's just like, do you really think that someone who hasn't had an opportunity of looking at this could ever answer that? It's sort of like good old Johnny in California. Hey, Dr. White, what do you think that Pope Innocent III was thinking on the morning of April 5th when he stubbed the second toe of his right foot and in Latin said, "Oh, drat"? Do you think that... No, sorry, Johnny. But sometimes, some of the questions you've asked. Hey, are you in a hurry, Mr. Pierce? Got people waiting. Okay, all right. It seemed like maybe you're in a hurry. Okay. All right, let's talk with Scott. Hi, Scott.
Hello, how are you doing?
Well, Rich wants me to get to you really, really fast. So, what did you slip him a 20 or something?
No, maybe it has something to do with the fact I'm calling from Canada.
Well, maybe.
Anyway, first of all, I just wanted to thank you for your faithfulness and consistency through the years. I get the opportunity to listen to a lot of stuff, and the Dividing Line backlogs are among them. Get to listen to a lot of things at work, and I was just working my way through 2006 this morning, and you actually had some very encouraging words. I've been dealing with a friend of mine who was once an inspiration to me in his pursuit of Jesus, but has now come to the conclusion that the Bible is a mixture of God's word, human words, and purely demonic words, which you can imagine having a conversation with a guy like that is a little difficult to get any traction. But the Dividing Line I was listening to this morning was after the Aragon-Canner debate had fallen through. You had Tom Askell on, and someone phoned in with the analogy, getting some truths across to some people is like a cured blind man hitting other blind men over the head with his staff, and it's